Hello, everyone. Thank you for sharing your love on the first video. Today, we have a special guest, Josh Simon, someone who truly wears many hats. He's a medical device design consultant, a professor at NJIT, and a life and a personal coach. In this episode, we will dive into his unique journey, the lessons he learned, and his insights on redefining success. So, hope you enjoy the conversation, and thank you so much for your love. Hello. Hey. Hi, Josh. Welcome to the podcast. Let's figure it out. Thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule. First and foremost, how are you?
I'm doing good, Jeet. Thank you for having me on here and giving me some of your time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been an amazing pleasure of myself to have you on the podcast. So, just to begin with our podcast, let's start by knowing you a bit more. So, could you tell me who you are and our audience, and a little bit more about your background?
Okay. My name is Josh Simon, and I've been for a little over 20 years now working in the medical device development field. Um, my whole education was originally geared towards that. Uh, I started off long ago at Rutgers University getting a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering with a biochemical option. And then shortly after that, found myself going for the master's degree. I was lined up to get a job. The job kind of collapsed at the very last second before I was going to fly out to go join them. And I was like, oh, phew. I applied to grad school, so off I go. And that switched me into biomedical engineering, and I got my master's there in biomedical engineering, and I got sucked into the PhD program shortly through that, towards the end of that. And I got ultimately my PhD in biomedical engineering in 2004 um, through some other series of events and just me being a lifelong learner in general. I got an MBA online in 2006. Yeah. And I went that way for a long time. And actually, like this past January in 2025, I got another degree, an associate's degree in psychology, mainly for fun and to supplement the coaching that I do as well. So I've had a interesting education and career.
Yeah, I can say that. I mean, like you're wearing multiple hats, and sort of like it's phenomenal to know from your like started from biomedical, getting into MBA, and now turning into completely the coaching side of the business. So tell me more about your like when you say that the biomedical side, the medical device. What's the most intriguing thing which led to like didn't stop you from bachelor's to master's and even getting a PhD? What was that one thing which helped you out there?
Well, it was funny when I was young. My father was a chemist, and he had a bachelor's degree in chemistry from Rutgers. And I said, Dad, I want to be a chemist like you. And he said, Well, chemists don't make a lot of money, Josh. And I said, Well, hey, hold on, I have to make a lot of money. How do you make money doing chemistry? And he said, Well, you have to do chemical engineering. And that conversation was probably around the time I was about 12 years old. So from the time I was 12 years old up through about 22, I stuck with chemical engineering. Uh, yeah, and he was right, except I never actually got a chance to do chemical engineering because I quickly became interested in how you can use chemical engineering concepts and other engineering concepts to look at the human body, look at the human body as a system of concepts and inputs, outputs, things like that. So that took me right to biomedical engineering.
Interesting. I think it's pretty much connected to each other. And I think that's how a lot of engineering programs are connected to each other. When it comes to general engineering, you do apply the same principles, but in different places. And you gave a great example of like how chemical can be applied to something like a biomedical, even though it's more on the biomedical side of the business, but it still can be applied on the engineered side. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So let me ask you this. Since you have this many degrees, what's next on your education goal?
Well, I'm in the second half of life here. I'm looking to settle down. A recent conversation with an old dear friend of mine that has a similar education to me says, Josh, as we get older, we get a little bit more people-ish, uh, and she was right. Both of us, in fact, my friend and I, are working on retiring as therapists. I'm going to my next degree is going to be a master's in counseling or clinical psychology, and I'm gonna retire with that. And at 65, I got about 15 more years to go. At about 65, I'll just be the old guy that everybody tells their problems to.
Need more people like that because there are a lot of problems in the world which needs to be solved for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, No, that's amazing. Amazing to hear. And it's more like it's giving me the vibe from you. It's like the keep going, like the learning sort of like motivation, one after the other. You didn't worry about like I have a PhD, why would I go for a associate degree? Which a lot of people think like, why would I downgrade my degree? But it needs that courage, it needs that motivation. So kudos to you on that part. Uh, so great educational background. Now, tell me more about like talk to me more about in terms of like what were some opportunities came after when you were getting this degrees like from biomedical. What was kind of your professional journey looks like, and how did it start? So like, how did biomedical change your life, and how did you get into the professional side of the business?
Well, as a newly minted PhD in 2004, I was immediately employed by what was at the time the fourth largest orthopedics company in the world, and that company also, for some reason, I don't know why, thinking back on it, put into my lap the biggest project that the company had ever conceived of and run, and it was to essentially make an injectable bone void filler that would speed up fracture healing. And so here I was, newly minted PhD, making this product. It was a synthetic protein, um, and I had to learn all the different pieces of that kind of project. It was very interesting and very cool. And in the meantime, what I was also doing was training the sales reps of this company for the science of their products, for the science of their orthopedic products. And I got so successful at that that they also started putting me in front of doctors to train the doctors and to teach the doctors about the science of these products. I started traveling all around the country, giving these talks, speaking at grand rounds presentations in hospitals, all kinds of things like that. And I was only maybe like 29, 30 years old at the time. Um, and after a couple of years of doing this, I went to my boss and I said, "Hey, I'm not entry level anymore. I mean, do you think there's something we can do about a small promotion? Maybe put the senior in front of my title, like senior research scientist, something along those lines." And he said, "Well," he said, "the problem is you haven't gotten any products out the door in 2 years." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course not. I'm working on a bone injection product that, is going to take 6 years to get through the FDA. It's a class 3 medical device. So no, I haven't gotten any products out the door, but I've been going around the country and training all these sales reps and training all these doctors. I mean, don't I get any, I mean, don't I get any credit for that? I'm not getting any credit for this. And like, you're not going to promote me for 6 years is what you're saying." And he said, and I'll never forget his exact words. His exact words were, "Yeah, that sucks." So I'm like, okay, well, at least I know where I stand. And by that point, all the marketing people were my friends because I was talking to their sales reps and their doctors. So I went down the hall to my buddies and I said, "Hey, do you guys need a PhD working for you guys in marketing?" And they're like, "Yeah, so we thought you'd never ask." And I said, "Well, I want a $10,000 raise." And they were like, "Done." And I was like, "Whoa." Maybe I should have asked for more, but I didn't know marketing made that much. And sure enough, they did. So I got into marketing and I would remain in marketing for about the next 7 years of my career at that point. And during that point and some other stuff that went on the side business I was doing, I got an MBA. And the MBA plus the PhD really opened a lot of doors for me. And what I learned And what I teach my students is that you really need to be good at two things or two languages. Because if you're just the PhD and the research guy, and you walk into the room, pretty much everyone goes, ugh, the research guy, right? Or if you're just the marketing guy and you walk into the room, everyone's definitely going, ugh, the marketing guy. But if you can be both and you can talk between the two of those and you speak both their languages, that's powerful. That's powerful. So I always give that advice to people. Like, if you can be proficient in two different areas, do it. Like, if you want to, whatever your two areas that you want to pick are. So I picked business and research, but if you want to do like regulatory and business or quality and research or something like that, do it, pick it, but be good in two. And that has served me throughout my career. The fact that I can speak between both the research scientists and the business people and talk about ROIs, but also talk about protein mechanisms of action for enzymes and things like that. You know, it's good. It really has helped me throughout my whole life.
So when you say that, if since you have two degrees in terms of like you have a PhD, which gives you more like a research kind of a background, plus also gives you more business background from your MBA, in your industry, when it comes to like when it comes to medical, when it comes to research, what kind of audience wants to hear more? I know a lot of people wants to hear more about like how does the product work, but is it what's the ratio looks like the working of the product versus what kind of money I'm going to make or what kind of impact it's going to bring on our business.
It really depends on who you're talking to. I mean, one of the things is that different people within the same company have different motivations, and often those motivations conflict. Um, so, back in my marketing days, I used to, in fact, pit people against each other on purpose for this effect to help me. Because, for instance, the finance people, I was selling them a license for a medical device coating to make medical devices more slippery. And the finance people hate paying royalties because for them, it's just money for nothing. The manufacturing people love royalties because they don't have to pay for raw goods, usually. So I would always go into both of those places, the finance people and the manufacturing people, and kind of like tell them a couple of things to make them fight a little bit to actually come out with a better deal for myself, because within the same company, they had different motivations. So it really depends. To answer your question, it really depends who you're asking about what people
So
care about.
that's true. Do you like in your back in the day when you were presenting to this kind of like say the C-suites or wherever you were presenting, what kind of techniques you're using? Was storytelling was part of this whole process?
Well, I mean, even to this day, I still use something called integrity selling from Integrity Solutions. That's when I train sales reps in the medical device field. I train a lot of medical device sales reps, and I use that selling method myself. Whenever it's not just like, oh, I'm going to sell you a product. It's like, oh, I need to convince you to think about something differently than you're thinking about it now. That's sales right there. That's everything sales is. Sales is nothing more, nothing less than changing someone's mind to think about something differently. And the integrity version of this is to be a counselor to them. Like, you're not pushing for a closing. If I can't help you, there's no business why I should be talking to you. But if I can help you, I'm going to help you because I care about what I can do for you, and I can really actually make a difference for you. And let's see what we can do. So usually, it doesn't matter whether I'm training a salesperson or whether I'm trying to get a new person into my coaching business to be my client, or whether I'm just trying to convince my high school aged child to take a course that they don't want to take in high school. It's all the same. It's just trying to change someone's mind.
True, true. No, you made a good point about like the counseling side of the thing is like I myself I'm a pre-sales person, so I work with customers on a daily basis, not directly selling the product, but I help my sales team with like providing the technical aspect of the product to help them sell better. And it's a great way to put it. Like if you add a value, if you show the value to the customer, definitely they will care, and you will care for their betterment as well. All right. So I also want to know about your other hat, which is you're a professor. So you also teach at NJIT. So talk to us more about like what is the sort of like the course you teach and how long have you been doing that?
I've been teaching at NJIT since 2009, and the first course I really taught there was a course called Medical Device Development. I still teach it to this day. Probably 1,000 people have gone through that course. Um, and I teach courses at NJIT that people, biomedical engineers in particular, will truly use for real out in the field. Too many classes in a lot of these programs are taught by academics who have never been in industry a day in their life, and they have zero idea of what biomedical engineers actually do. And the reason why I created this course, Medical Device Development, was because I got out into the field in 2004 and I had no idea. Even on the day I defended my PhD, I still had no idea what biomedical engineers actually did in real life. It was amazing. I was so angry. I spent 12 years in school, like after 12th grade, and I I didn't still didn't know what biomedical engineers did. And I never forget, my first few weeks working at this orthopedics company, the head of regulatory and quality comes and drops it. He says, do you know what design controls? I'm like, what are design controls? And he drops this giant binder on my desk. I mean, it had to be like this thick. Boom. He says, design controls, know them, love them. And he walks away. And I'm looking at this stuff and I'm going through this binder. It took me weeks. And I'm just getting so incredibly angry because I was never taught any of this stuff in school. Like the stuff they teach you in classes is valuable for for academic principles purposes, and you should know it. But there's nothing that they teach you in most schools that actually you use in real life. So at that point, I swore I didn't want to let that happen to other people after me if I could help it. And I developed this medical device development course and a few others since then. And I teach them at NJIT, and thankfully, the predominant comment from people who have taken these courses is, "Wow, I actually am going to use this in real life. This is practical, cool." And that's the point. That's the point. So my theme generally as a professor at NJIT as an adjunct there is to teach classes that people actually use.
That's a really great point because no matter how much study or no matter how many degrees you have, but if you don't apply them in the real world on an actual application, it's of no use because you haven't explored what's out there. Because all you have done is like read few books and or like done some projects, but is it a real project? Because I myself, I'm coming from an engineering background, and I can relate a little bit more to your medical device in history because I worked myself with a mini motor manufacturing company back in the day, and we used to sell to this medical device customers. So motor was one of the component which was going into this different devices, and that's the place where I learned more about like the general applications of what engineering can do and what's the scope looks like. So that's a great sort of like initiative by you by designing this course to help other students who are going out and sort of like applying it in the real world.
And it's important that the teachers who teach this stuff have actually done it. I mean, it's great to teach biomechanics and cellular molecular tissue engineering and things like that are concepts. Like you need to know that stuff. You have to have like 80% of your degree be academic. And the academics are good people to teach this. They should be teaching that. But the academics, it's important to understand the academics are academics. Like they don't actually know anything about industry or how industry works or how medical devices are truly developed. They know the science and they should know the science. That's their job. And you need the industrial people to come in and teach the industrial things. I mean, it's I feel that a lot of students in the upper realms of education, like in the later masters, definitely the PhD, I feel like a lot of them are lied to in a sense because they're told that they're going to be professors. And that's a little bit like telling a kid in Little League that you're going to be a Major League Baseball player because it happens, but it's like one in a million. And to prepare your whole life just for that one in a million possibility. I mean, if that's what you want to do, okay, but you probably ought to have a backup plan, right?
That is
And
true.
I don't think that we prepare people enough in PhD programs to for that possibility, that eventuality.
Well, very well said in terms of like what's the future looks like for when you apply the right kind of knowledge into the right place and apply in the real world. So, uh, awesome. So let's talk more about like changing or coming out from like a regular 9 to 5 to coming into your own consulting sort of world. So what was that one thing which sort of like made the decision that let me get out of the regular 9 to 5 and get into my own thing?
Well, it was, I guess, in a way, a midlife crisis, right? I back in 2014, um, I was working at a fairly toxic company, and I just got outright fired. And several days within that period, so did several of the people on my team. We just all got like bam, 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 knocked out. And I kind of then started a period of about a year and a half where I was job hopping. I was getting into jobs through connections that I had, and they're kind of doing me a favor, and I was kind of just not really serious about it, and it didn't really work because my heart wasn't in it anymore. I was kind of no longer able to accept the idea that I would be in a company, drink their Kool-Aid, and then do a good job, and then be rewarded with more work, making the people at the top more money, and that just kind of collapsed my whole idea of what I wanted to do in life. And I'm not trying to badmouth that. I mean, if that's your idea of what you want to do, then go do it, right? But for me, there was something else. You know, I wanted a different life, and so I did a little bit of soul searching, like, well, what kind of life do I want? And I decided the life that I want was one where I'd work at home and I would be able to have flexible time and make my own hours, and hopefully not have a boss breathing down my neck, or at least not have a corporation where I'd have to kind of drink their Kool-Aid and profess their message and make them all this money for only to be rewarded with more work if I do well. So I kind of accidentally found a job writing clinical evaluation reports for a very large orthopedics company, not the one I originally worked for. And I, I was like, oh, hey, I could do that. And I got really good at it. And I started getting more of those kinds of gigs. And before I knew it, I was sustaining myself with my own consulting company, which, 11 years later is still going. And I still take consulting jobs. That's what sustains me. That's how I make my living as a one man company consultant. And I can tell you, I have never been happier over the last 11 years. Because
Well, that's what
I always call
matters.
myself like, yeah, I'm like the fun medical device uncle. Like I take the baby and I hold the baby and I bounce the baby on my knee and then I give the baby back. I don't adopt the baby. I don't adopt the company's problems. I take him in, I look at him, I tinker with him, and I give the problems back to the company, and I don't adopt the problems. So I love that. It's great.
Well, that's an amazing way to put it, in a way that it is working out for you and sort of like giving you what you were actually hoping out of it when you actually made the decision. So, uh, another question on this one is, what were the initial challenges you were facing? Like, let's say you made the decision, but what were the initial challenges when you were looking out, like, what would be my role or what I would be doing? So, can you just share some story over there?
Yeah, people say it's challenging becoming a consultant and doing consulting, and it is. You're not wrong. Um, Number one thing you need to have is a specialty. So, like, you can't be a 22-year-old fresh out of college that suddenly goes in and becomes a consultant telling other people twice your age what to do. Because frankly, I'm sorry, but you don't really know anything yet. You don't have, as far as experience goes, you don't have any experience. Um, and so you do need to spend some time working first, like I did. I spent 10 years working and doing all kinds of things and getting all kinds of experience before I even attempted this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you need the client base get the client base. You need connections, so you need to spend those first 2 years building connections. I mean, my old professor used to tell me, "He who dies with the most business cards wins," and that's back when business cards were a thing. Now it's like he who dies with the most LinkedIn connections wins, right? So I connect with LinkedIn on everyone with everyone who I ever interact with, and have over 5,000 LinkedIn connections. So you got to get those connections going. And then the other thing I learned, I always thought of this idea of consulting was, in order to make a living at consulting, you need to have like 16 different clients doing 32 different things, or you're going to starve. And that's just not true. What really happens, because then people go, "Oh my God, how am I going to get so many clients?" What really happens is you have one or two at first, really only one or two, mostly all the time, right? Um, you have one or two clients that you're connected to in some other way, amicably, and they're giving you more work than you know what to do with. And that's why there are so many consultants, not because every consultant has 16 companies, but because every consultant has one or two. And those one or two companies are giving them more work than they could ever possibly do. Just those one or two. Now, I mean, it's a problem if one of them leaves you, you have to go find another one. But if you don't have that connection, if you don't have the ability to amicably do consulting with one company after you leave them, or you've worked with them for a while, then it is challenging, because then you have to convince them to be your client. Once you get those one or two and your reputation starts to precede you, it gets a little easier to get the clients. So I personally have five active clients, several inactive, but five active clients. I would say that three of those five are really paying my bills, and then two of them are kind of minor, low end clients right now. They could blow up any second, but that's how it is. So it's um it's challenging, but it's doable.
It's worth it, right? So
Yeah.
because yeah, for sure. So it's something like any sort of like an advice you can give to someone who is like still thinking, because I'm pretty sure, just like you mentioned, that you need to have connections. You need to have the first baby steps when you are want to go for like a self-employment. There are like a lot of people who have to start on a daily basis that I want to do something my own, or even just start something my own on the side. Any sort of like advice you can offer that which sort of like are learning for you that, hey, it is possible, but you need to do these kind of things.
You need to become a collector of connections. Um, like I said, I have kept connections through at least LinkedIn connection with every single vendor, every single consultant, every single coworker that I have ever worked with, every single client that I've ever worked with since 2004. Okay. And I have them still on my LinkedIn. So because and I've made hundreds of thousands of dollars off of LinkedIn, not because I do all the stupid AI stuff or whatever the other cliches and platitudes that LinkedIn does right now are, right? But because I have made real connections with people over that time, and been able to go to someone who I met 10 years ago and said, "Oh, hey, you remember when we did blah 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 like 10 years ago? What would you think if we did this?" And they go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah." And then it turns into something, or I get a client, and then we make money. So it's really like LinkedIn as a storage of connections that you go back to, and all throughout your career you're accumulating those, and that's like accumulating the bank account. That's what it is.
It's true. That is so true, because LinkedIn has helped me a lot when I was searching back in the day when I was searching for job. It's more like sometimes you don't find the right role, but you find the right individual where you can learn more about that role that you're applying. And that's also something like you're learning something new. And I've been so fortunate to have like many connections from whom I'm learning on a daily basis. You are one of them on my LinkedIn. So thank you for that. All right. So now let's move to our amazing segment for the coaching side. So I was reading this book of like, you become what you think. And the one quote which sort of like stuck in my mind is like, your life don't get better by chance. It gets better by a change. So it was written by Jim Rohn. But using this statement, I would love to know from your end that having this amazing life of getting a PhD, getting an MBA, getting everything what you can possibly do, and then getting your own company started. What was that one trigger, one change which you were looking for, and that made you direct at this side of the life, your second, I would say, innings of the life, which is the coaching side?
Yeah, I actually remember it perfectly. The very instant that it happened. Honestly, I was kind of outside my garage door was open, and I'm getting into my really nice car, and I just kind of stopped, and I said, "Wow, I have it all. Like I've got the kids, four of them. I've got the house, really nice house. I've got the car. I've got the wife. I've got all this great stuff, and I got my own business that sustains me. I make good money, and what am I doing? I mean, it was almost like the sun came out and kind of hit me in the head, and everything got clear, and there was like this overwhelming sense from the whole universe in a way that said, you will give back to others, and you will become a coach, and then you will become a therapist, and you will help people instead of being so selfish. And that's what, right there, it was just kind of like a bam, a smack in the head, uh, from the universe that said, you got to do this. And it was at that point where I said, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to become a coach first and then a therapist. And I started my journey looking into doing the Rutgers Leadership for Organizational Coaching. Uh, Rutgers Coaching, it's called LCOP, Leadership Coaching for Organizational Performance, Rutgers LCOP program. And I went through the intensive LCOP program, became a coach, got certified as a coach. Also, then took another certification with the Jungian Coaching School. I became a certified Jungian coach that uses Carl Jung, Jungian psychology as a principle for coaching. And did my hours. I take clients. So while I don't make my living as a coach right now, I'm not sure I would if I could, because I like what I do in the other side of the medical device too much. But I do coach a good number of clients for personal development, for business. Generally, the theme behind my coaching is that I coach people to have better relationships with their own selves, and in so doing, they automatically then get better relationships with others and with their work and with their life purpose and that kind of stuff. So having a better relationship with yourself is kind of like the key that I use to all that stuff.
God, that's fascinating because you just mentioned about like personal development and business. So can you tell me a little bit more about like what's the key difference you see? Like if someone comes to you that I want to do personal development coaching versus someone's wants to get more better with the business side, how does those things are a bit different and how can one individual learn more about it?
Well, I mean, what people may or may not realize is that everything in your work goes back to your life, and everything in your life goes back to your work. So while some people may be coming to me for executive coaching because they're in a company and the company is paying for it, and they want to do it in the context of the company goals, yeah, okay, that's fine. But what inevitably will come up, 100% guarantee it, in every client is personal issues, personal growth, personal development all the time, because that's what's in the way of their business development. uh, if people come to me on the personal side and want to do personal development coaching, okay, here we go. Yeah, there we go. But it's almost always going to go back to, oh, am I really doing what I want to do in life? What does my work mean to me? And it's the same thing. So the tools are the same, the techniques are the same. It's just who's paying me is a little different, and what you tell the people who are paying you is a little different.
Nice way to put it in. Uh, Talk to me more about like the Jungian coaching because this is something which is new for me, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people would love to know about it. So, what exactly is Jungian coaching, and how did it affect in your life?
Well, I mean, in my life, I mean, if it's not apparent by now, I mean, I'm a huge nerd, right? So, uh, uh, my, uh, my side fixation for being a nerd is that I study adult psychological development, right? So I've been doing this for 30 years, and um, I started out with a lot of different theory, and I've become quite familiar with something called integral theory and spiral dynamics, and worked within those. Claire Graves for spiral dynamics. He's the inventor of that. And then Ken Wilber is the perpetrator of integral theory and continues to maintain it. There's some offshoots of both of those, but I got very familiar with those. That kind of brought me to a community where one day I lost an argument on the internet. I forget what the argument was about. It was some deep philosophical thing, but I totally lost. And I think I lost by trying to quote somebody. And the person who won said to me, you can't really reliably quote somebody until you've really understood their mind and read everything they've written. And I just kind of, well, I kind of thought, well, that's ridiculous, but okay, let's just take that let's consider it. And I said, well, who would I read? And I said, you know what? I'd read Carl Jung. I don't know why it kind of came to me because I was just interested a little bit in psychology. So I started. Now, the thing is, boy, did I pick somebody because Carl Jung wrote 20 volumes of stuff. And I started reading. I started with his PhD thesis and continue even to this day. I'm on volume 13 of 20 right now, and it took me about like 5 or 6 years to get here, a little bit more. And Carl Jung created a lot. He was the guy who created a lot of the concepts that we're very familiar with. We don't even really realize we're using Carl Jung, like the concept of your unconscious mind, the concept of your ego, introvert, extrovert. Ever hear of introverts and extroverts? That is a concept that was basically mined out of the ancient literature by Carl Jung. Yeah, so all of the Myers Briggs personality type indicator, that that was completely mined out of Carl Jung's information, Carl Jung's books. So a lot of these ideas that we talk about, I mean, the concept of libido is not a sexual thing. Under Carl Jung's psychology, libido is any energy, psychologically, any energy to do anything. Your get up and go, your energy to get up and go is libido. When you talk about energy, what we mean is E equals MC squared. To say energy about your thoughts and your feelings, it's not scientific, but to use a different term like libido instead of energy, it's just interchangeable with that, and that's what he means. So we have that concept already. So a lot of stuff is Carl Jung. I use it in coaching because, as I said before, I'm helping people get a better relationship with themselves. So in order to do that, I have to, as their coach, put them in contact with themselves. So
Yeah.
I put people in contact with their own unconscious selves, and I let the two of them work it out and talk. And I'm kind of like the referee, and I just kind of referee and moderate the conversation, and then the person talks to the piece that they're working with. And that's basically the difference between Jungian coaching and regular coaching. In regular coaching, the coach asks you these powerful questions that kind of make you go, what would I do about that? In Jungian coaching, the coach puts you in touch with your own unconscious self and then lets you talk to it on your own. And it's like my teacher would say, you're a flight attendant. You're just peanuts, soda. It's all you're doing, and then they're working it out. So it works a little differently, but it's extremely powerful.
Interesting. So it's more like your answers of your own problems are within you. So like you have
Absolutely.
to, it'll be found from your own self. So that brings me one more question in terms of like how does or like if let's say someone's asking you about like they have problems in their life in terms of making tough decisions, and when it comes to this is let's keep it in general in terms of like personal as well as professional. What is one principle which can help anyone to make the tough decisions a bit more simple in a way, more like simplified to how to come to the conclusion?
If I, from a coaching perspective, the way I look at that is that it requires a little bit more information. When someone comes to me with a problem like that, the first thing I have to understand is do they really know? Do they really like have a situation where they just don't know what to do, or is there a situation where they know what to do, but they feel a certain way about it. They're emotional. I don't. I mean, just from what you're putting forth in your scenario, I'm not too sure, but I would get sure. I would become sure by asking questions. And then what we use, especially in Jungian coachings, we use something called the compensation principle. If you come at me with a doing problem, I'm going to go at you with being. I'm going to address how you can be during the problem. If you come at me with a being problem, you're emotional, you're kind of distraught. I'm going to come at you with doing, and we're going to work through talking to the parts of yourself that have to do with doing. And by using that compensation principle, which I could always go into more, but I'm not going to unless you ask, it's powerful for working out what should happen next. Maybe the person can resolve their feelings over it, or maybe the person can actually figure out what to do.
That's very interesting. Like these kind of techniques are sort of like pretty new to me. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing more on the Jungian coaching, and also like giving more examples of the actual techniques which can help solve problems for people. But do you have a mantra for like a good work-life balance? Since you have a tremendous amount of professional experience, would love to know what's your mantra for it.
I mean, certainly that you want to work to live rather than live to work. That one comes to mind a lot. Um, I definitely I use sort of the grief per dollar term a lot. So when you work, you want to maximize dollars per hour. Of course, you want to make as many dollars per hour as you possibly can. But there's another quantity that people overlook a lot, and that's grief per dollar. And what I mean by that is how much grief you have to go through to earn that dollar, to earn each dollar. And so if I, for example, were to be offered a job for like $1 million a year right now, that's a high dollar per hour thing. But if for some reason that job meant that I would be traveling 90% of the time, I would never see my family, I would have no vacation, I would have all this money and I have no time to enjoy it, that's a very, very high grief per dollar scenario for me. So I would absolutely take a job for half of that, lower dollar per hour, if it meant that I can see my family, I can go on vacation, I can enjoy the money, because that job would be a lower grief per dollar value. So whenever I evaluate work life or jobs or taking jobs or my current job, I ask myself, okay, what's the grief per dollar right now? Or what's the grief per dollar of that job? How much grief is it?
It's so true because at the end of the day, all it counts is the memories you made with your family or your loved ones versus something like the money you made because you're still gonna keep that money over here when you're gonna die. So that's a very good point
Absolutely. And
of like
you go
having a
through life for your first half always trying to get to some imaginary goal or imaginary thing where you think that you'll peak and everything will be happy. And then one day you kind of realize that you're going into the second half and you're changing. Instead of looking forward at what you're gonna be, you start looking back at what you did, what you did, what you did. So there's never a time where you'll reach that nirvana. Um, it just switches from looking forward to looking back, and it's a scary
so true.
time.
So true. Well, I think you have given us an amazing sort of uh, like idea about how to live a better life, managing a better work-life balance, and also like thank you for sharing a lot of your professional journey and your sort of like education journey is very motivational to a lot of people. So thank you for that. And I'm pretty sure next time when we're gonna chat, pretty sure you have another degree on your head. So can't wait on that part. But Josh, thank you so much for sharing the time and like sharing your overall story with us. And we wish you all the best with your coaching career and we'll stay connected. And thank you.
It was a pleasure, Jeets. Thanks for having me.